Here's just what's happening today. We've got somebody who'll be starting, and I hope that you'll be inspired by what you hear today and come on the rest of the business startup journey. Now, even more importantly, our keynote speaker, Tom Ilube.
Thank you, and good afternoon. It is true that last year, not now, but last year, I was the most powerful black person in the UK. Now I've been demoted, someone else has taken it over. And I remember when blimey, where did that come from? I remember when I was phoned and someone told me this, I went home and I said to my wife, do you know I'm the most powerful black person in the UK? And she said, you? You're not even the most powerful black person in this house. So I sort of know my place, really, so I don't get too carried away by that. So let's get started. What I'm going to do is tell you a bit about my journey as a businessman, as an entrepreneur, and maybe talk about some of my charitable activities, but really try and give you some insights into how I go about doing what I do. I've worked for a number of companies. My early career was quite a corporate career, so PricewaterhouseCoopers, Goldman Sachs, companies like that. My first job was at British Airways. I'll come back to that later. And then I started setting up entrepreneurial companies, set up a company called Lost Wax, was involved in setting up Egg. I was the chief information officer there. We built a big bank really quite quickly that then floated on the exchange. I set up a company called Garlic that we sold to Experian. I did a management buyout with a group of people of Call Credit that we grew, and then we sold that 4 or 5 years later. And as part of that, I launched a venture called Noddle, which quickly grew to about 2 million customers. And then most recently, I've set up Crossword, the cybersecurity company. So I am an early stage technology entrepreneur. I think of an idea, I start the business, I raise money, I put a team together, I build the business, I sell the business, I lose money or make money, I retire, then I unretire, and I say to my wife, I'm just going to do one more, just the last one, and then I do it all again. And so that's what I'm doing now. They always start the same way. They start basically with me sitting in a room on my own with a flip chart. This is the actual start of Crossword. And it says to-do list, number 1, start new company. And then I go to lunch because I've sort of done my I've done my job for the day. And they always start. Now often people think, and I'll come back to this right at the end, often people think that the way you start a company is by coming up with a great idea. In my experience, the way you start a company is by deciding you're going to start a company. There's something in you that says this is going to happen, and then you figure out what the idea is going to be. In fact, you probably figure out 50 ideas and you throw away 40 of them and you change 10 of them and you eventually get to the idea that you're going to go forwards with. But it doesn't start, if you have someone going about saying, I would start a company, I just can't think of the idea, they're not really going to start it. If you've got someone going about that just says, I'm going to create something, I am going to start a company, it comes from there somewhere, and that's where it starts, and that's where it always starts for me. I'll give you a few insights that I've picked up, and I'll sort of draw upon these companies that are all quite different companies. So Egg was an internet bank. It was the UK's first major internet bank. We grew it from a blank sheet of paper to about 4 million customers, over £1 billion in value, listed on the London Stock Exchange, eventually sold to Citibank. So that went on a tremendous journey, big investment, big team, and so forth. Garlic was a venture capital funded startup company, again blank sheet of paper. As you can see, I was going through food-based themes, egg, garlic. Another one I did was Noddle. It was going to be Noodle, but Noodle was gone, so I had to go Noddle. But Garlic was an identity protection company, an ID cybersecurity type of company. Call Credit was a credit reference agency, and Noddle was an idea that we had to launch a business out of that was about giving people access to their information, and we launched that in the consumer market and quickly grew it. And then Crossword is a hardcore cybersecurity company, very pointy-headed. We work with universities that are doing research in cybersecurity. We commercialize their work and take it out to market. So I'll draw upon some of these experiences and sort of talk through how I go about it when I start these companies, and then we'll open up to maybe some questions at the end. We might do that thing when we get to the question stage where I grin at you and you grin at me and we all look nervous for a while, but eventually you'll ask some questions. A lot of people start with the idea. I try and start with the market. Who am I interested in targeting? Who am I going after? And I spend a lot of time getting my mind around who I'm targeting and also who I'm not targeting. So I'll sort of put boundaries on it. And the tighter the market, in my experience, the more likely it is that the business is going to work. And when you hear a lot of people saying, well, my product could be used by anyone, you know, it doesn't matter whether they're 18 years old or 80-year-old or whatever, I sort of think, I don't know about that. You know, in my experience, the tighter you are on, I am really designing this product for this type of company, for this type of consumer, the more likely you are to be successful. So I think as you're thinking of your own ideas, don't be afraid to say, actually, this particular product, it isn't really designed, you know, if people say, well, how would that be of interest to men over the age of 60? And you say, it's not. It's not aimed at men over the age of 60. It's aimed at people aged this, that, and the other who live in this part of London or this part of the UK or this part of the world. The tighter the market, the more likely you are to find something that really, really matters to those people. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for something that matters, not something that people are vaguely interested in, but something they're angry about, they want solved, they're excited about. You know, you're pushing and pushing until you get to that thing that they're really concerned about. So I would spend a lot of time on figuring out who your market is, at least as much time on figuring out what your product's about and so forth. Just spend a lot of time, and you've got to talk to your market. You know, you can't say, you know, I'm designing this for children in primary school, and then I would say, okay, what did children in primary school say when you talk to them about it? And you say, I haven't talked to any. Well, that's no good. You know, you have got to go and talk to people who are in your market, tell them about the idea, and see whether they tell you that it's a good idea, not how smart you think the idea is, how smart the audience that you're targeting is. So that's really where you start. Then you need the hook. When you think of your product, one of the key things is you've got this great idea for this broad product, but somewhere in there's got to be a sharp hook that gets people to say, I want that. You know, and a lot of people, they think of products that do all sorts of things, and yeah, it does a bit of this and a bit of that, and oh, it does that as well. And the product becomes too sort of jelly-like. What you're looking for is in that product, in the heart of it, what's the thing that's going to get people to say, actually, I want one of those? You see it a lot in the media. You know, channels will do that. They will pull you into the channel with a specific program that they know is going to be a blockbuster. At the BBC at the moment, we are loving Blue Planet, because Blue Planet gets somewhere like 14 million people an episode looking at it, a staggering proportion of the UK population. And if you can get people into a particular proposition, then maybe they'll watch the program that came on before and watch the program that came on after and re-engage with the brand and so forth. So, you know, you're looking for the thing in your product that just really gets people engaged. So let's say you know what your audience is, you've got your product, now you need to raise money. This is interesting. This is you trying to raise money, and these are the people with the money. This one's making fun of you here. I have done this so many times. You've seen Dragon's Den. I have probably been standing in front of people 200 times pitching for them for money over and over again. And the key thing there is persistence. Someone once asked me, you know, what I would consider to be my unique skill, what really helps me in terms of setting up businesses and running businesses. And I've gradually got clear what it is that I am good at. In fact, I'm probably one of the best, if not the best person in this room at it. I am very, very good at failure. Most people are not good at failure. They don't want it to happen. They're worried about it. They're worried about how they might look. I fail constantly, over and over again, and I just don't care. I keep going. When I was about your age, some of you in the room, and I was applying for jobs, I said my first job was at British Airways. The reason why my first job was at British Airways is because I applied to every company in the UK that began with A, and they all said no. And then I moved on to the Bs, and I got almost through the Bs, and British Airways gave me a job. So when people say, why did you work for British Airways? Because they began with B, basically. And that was when you had to apply with a letter, because, as I said to my daughter, we didn't so much use the internet and email when I was at university, and she said, why not? And I said, because it hadn't been invented. So I was applying by writing letters. So I would literally be printing out 20, 30 letters a day, applications, and sending them out. In fact, it got to the stage where the postman would come, I would open the door, I would give him a batch of letters, he would give me a batch of rejection letters, and then we'd go on. There was nobody more relieved than the postman when I finally got a job. I once applied to the same company 5 times for the same job. I applied to this company, and they sent me back a rejection letter. Now, for me, that just proves that the lines of communication are open. So I applied to them again. They rejected me, applied again. The 4th time I applied to them, I got a letter from them saying, dear Mr. Ilube, please will you call the head of human resources for Europe? And I said, you see these people? I suddenly became very African. You see these people? They're messing with me. So I phoned her up and I said, yes, it's Ilube, yes. She said, Tom, you don't have the right experience, you don't have the right background, we will never offer you a job. So I waited 2 weeks and applied again. Years later, one of my businesses, this company was a consultancy company, they wanted to get into startup businesses. These guys, they came to see me and they pitched their company, and I was so tempted to say, you don't have the right experience, but I let them off. I use that same thing in fundraising. I will typically pitch to 50 to 100 people in order for one of them to say yes. That even today, with my experience and my network, when I go out fundraising, I expect from the start to pitch to 50 to 100 people to get one to say yes. Sometimes I talk to students or recent graduates, it's so difficult, I've applied to 20 jobs and I've got 20 rejections, and I say, oh yeah, it's so hard. But inside I'm thinking 20, 50, I'm just loosening up, and when I'm out fundraising, I will pitch over and over and over again, every opportunity I get. I remember that there were some VC guys in San Francisco I wanted to pitch to. I just thought my idea was perfect for them, and I was trying to get in to see them, and they were sort of putting me off, and eventually I got hold of one of the guys and by email, and he said, okay Tom, look, next time you're in San Francisco, come and see us, we'll give you 5 minutes. So I said, actually, I'm in San Francisco at the moment, can I come tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, end of day tomorrow, just 5 minutes at the end of the day. So he said, oh, I didn't realize you were here, okay, yeah, come. So I went to Heathrow, and I bought a ticket and I flew to San Francisco, and I got there in time, and I went in and I pitched, and 5 minutes in he said, no, we're not interested. Oh, that was tough. I went and I sat on a bench and I burst into tears. Actually, the rejection does hurt. It is going to hurt, and it's not so much that you don't feel the failure, you don't feel the rejection. It's how you deal with it that matters. You get rejected, and then you come back again, and then you come back again, and everyone else in the room gives up, and you're still going. If you learn nothing else, if you do nothing else as a startup person, or pretty much in any part of your life, if you keep going, it's amazing where you can get to, as I said to my wife the first time she rejected me when I proposed. And eventually you do get the money, but you've got to have your elevator pitch. That is really, really important, that 30-second pitch. Often people who are starting their businesses, they tell me about your business, Half an hour later, they're still sort of explaining it. You have got to have your 30-second pitch. If you bump into someone who could give you the money, you don't want to say to them, could I have a meeting with you? Because actually that was your meeting. That sentence, that could I have a meeting with you, that was your meeting. You use that 30 seconds you've got with them to give them your pitch in a way that they say to you, actually you need to come and see me. And so you've got to work on that pitch. What is the thing that is going to get into their mind that's going to say, I need to talk to this person? This was taught to me in quite a stark way. I went to see a venture guy in London, and he said to me, Tom, have you got your elevator pitch? And I said, yes. Because when you're pitching for money, anything the people with the money say, you say yes. So I said, yes. So he said, okay, come with me. So we went down the corridor. I thought we were going to a meeting room. It turned out we were going to an elevator. And we got into the elevator, and he pressed 5, and he said, go on then. And I said, okay. And then the doors opened, and he said, hi. That was my opportunity. After that, I had an elevator pitch. You know, I have literally been in situations where, you know, I've been with, I once did a speech many years ago with Bill Gates, him and me on the stage. He says, what are you doing? I have 30 seconds. You know, I'm never going to get that opportunity again. I had my elevator pitch. I told him my idea. He said, and wandered off. But at least I had my elevator pitch. You know, you are going to be in situations with people that could define the success or failure of your business, and you have got to have that 30-second pitch ready to go. And in fact, that brings us on to how you communicate. So getting out there, the PR, the engaging with the press is going to be really, really important. When we launched this cybersecurity company, Garlic, me and my co-founder, Mike Harris, we did this thing where we were literally up to our necks in paper and wires and all the rest of it, and they took a photo of that. And you know, the media is really interesting. When I remember talking to a bunch of guys, media guys, about this, and what they said is that the thing you need to understand is that every newspaper, every morning, they have 60 pages that are blank, and by the end of the day, they have to fill those pages with something, and then at the end, and then they're back to square one again, 60 blank pages, and they've got to fill them again. So they want stories, and they want pictures, so they want what you've got. On the other hand, you have to remember that you're sending what you think is your brilliant, amazing idea to this newspaper or to this magazine or to this website and saying, hey, talk about me. And the journalist who's getting it is also getting another 50 or 100 from everyone else who's saying, hey, look at my new idea. So they are being bombarded with ideas every day, but they do want ideas. So you really need to get it into your heads that it's a battle. However smart you think your idea is, you've got to think, how can I make it easy for the journalist to put it into their newspaper, and what image am I giving them? So this one we put together, the Express really liked it and they published it. And actually, if you could see round this, there isn't actually paper up to our necks. Our legs are sticking out there. There's just someone on a ladder looking down at us with a few bits of paper around us. There was a time the PR company, they said, okay, Tom, we want to talk about transparency. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you in a transparent bubble in the middle of Trafalgar Square, and we're going to roll you around, and we're going to let people roll you around Trafalgar Square. Now, I knew that that would have got on TV, but I didn't do that one. There are limits even for me, but you know, you are going to have to push yourselves on the PR side if you really want to break through and get that sort of mass media. And you need to be able to tell your story in a simple way. The simplest way to tell your story as a business, whether it's a CSR, you know, a not-for-profit business, a social enterprise, or a commercial business, is to use a structure that I use over and over again, which is the Dragon Knight Happily Ever After structure. You just fit your story into, there's a dragon, there's some problem, there's something that's scary. You know, what is the dragon? What's the problem? And it's got to be big and scary enough that people care about it. You can't say, you know, it's a little bit cold outside. people say, who cares? You've got to say, global warming is changing the planet. Yeah, that's a dragon. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do about that? So you tell people this is the problem in a way that gets them going, I care about that. Your solution, or what you're doing, or your product, is the knight coming along to slay the dragon. This is the dragon, here's the knight that's going to slay the dragon. But you don't stop there. You've slain the dragon, what's the happily ever after? How is the world a better place? How is their life a better place as a result of what you've done? And if you can distill your entire pitch down to dragon, knight, happily ever after, you'll find that you can get that down to 30 seconds, and that's what the media need. And what you'll find is, if you ever do media interviews, there are two things to remember. One is I was being media trained by someone, and they said, what does the BBC stand for? And I said, British Broadcasting Corporation. And they said, no, it stands for bum back of chair. I said, what? And they said, the TV emphasizes, exaggerates everything. So if you sit like that, when you appear on TV, it'll look like you're sitting like that. So don't do that. Just push yourself back, sit up straight. That's really important. But the more important thing is, when you're doing media interviews, you will almost always get asked 3 questions. If you listen to interviews after this, you'll notice, over and over again, they seem to ask 3 questions. So, Mr. Ilube, tell me about the problem. And then you go, right, well, there's a dragon, and there's a solution, and happily ever after. You have to get your whole story in all in one go straight away in case they cut you off. So you give them the whole 30 seconds. And then they say, whose problem is it? Who's causing this? Is it the government? Is it big business? They want to know who the bad guy is. So you decide who you're going to tell them the bad guy is. Well, the real problem is the government, blah, blah, or the real problem is big business. You're ready for that question as well. And then they say, so what should the person on the street do about it? The average person. The average person should do 3 things. There should always be 3 things. You can't say, if you say, the average person should do 4 things, they'd be like, 4 things? That's crazy. That never happens. No, it's always 3. The average person should do 3 things. 1, 2, 3. And if you do that, then they'll think, that was a really good interview, and they'll call you back over and over again, and you'll get known for doing good interviews. So practice and getting out there is really important. You're going to have to sell. You can't avoid it. If you're going to start a business, somebody is going to have to sell something. A lot of businesses say, well, what we're going to do is we're going to create this product and we're going to put it out there and it'll sell itself. It won't sell itself. No. Somebody is going to have to sell this product. It's either you or it's someone that you hire. And that is just a part of doing business, and that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with it. And so if you get the opportunity, you might as well practice selling something to someone. And also, it's really hard to pick salespeople if you've never sold anything to anyone. How on earth are you going to know whether someone's a genuine salesperson if you haven't had a go at trying to sell something and getting them to say yes and getting them to hand over some money? So selling is really important. You might as well learn how to do it. And one of the things that you need to know how to do in selling, but also generally in negotiating, is how to manage a negotiation. And the key thing for me is I'm always quite methodical about it. I actually do this. I get a piece of paper, I put a line down the middle of the piece of paper. On one side I write what I would like to have, on the other side I like what I must have. And what I would like to have, I say I'd like to get this price, and I'd like this, and I'd like this, and I have a whole list of likes. On the other side, I have my must-haves, and that's a very short list. I will walk away if I don't get these 3 things. So my like list might be 20 different things. My must-have are the absolute things that I will walk away if I don't get. And then I'm negotiating in between those 2 things. A lot of people for some reason, don't do that sort of thinking up front, so they start negotiating in real time, and it all ends up in a bit of a mess. But if you get yourself really clear on that, it actually makes negotiations really easy. How do you build a great team? So you can't do this on your own. You can't be a sole entrepreneur. There is no such thing. You are going to be a team. And your teams will almost always go through a form, storm, perform sort of cycle. You get the team together, everyone's happy, everyone looks like they're all working together, and then it all falls apart and you start arguing with each other. And then you get through that and somebody leaves and it's all a bit uncomfortable, and then you start performing. And you think, am I a bad manager? Or, am I not really a leader? Why did they start arguing with each other? And then you remember that bloke Tom said, all teams do this all the time. Every team you build throughout your career is going to go through a forming stage, a storming stage, a performing stage in some form. In fact, now when I put teams together, I try and get them to get into this stage quickly. They have to get through, they have to stop the stage of being polite with each other, and the elbows have to come out a bit, because that's all part of becoming a team. So when you realize that, you sort of relax about that a bit. You don't kind of think, oh God, I've got these people together, I just wanted us all to be happy, why are they arguing? You say, okay, they've got to argue. We've got to disagree on some things. We've got to see how we disagree on them. We've got to work through that, and we've got to come out the other side and start performing. And that will happen over and over again. So again, the earlier you start to try that, you start to experience that, and you just realize that is just the way teams are put together, and that's how they work, the better. To do that, you have to know quite a lot about yourself, really. So, you have to sort of, one of the things of being an entrepreneur is you really start to learn about who you are as an individual. One of the things I often use, just because it's a good way to think about it and a good structure, is Myers-Briggs personality type. So this is my Myers-Briggs personality type. If you want to know the sort of person I am an introvert, big picture, feeling, judging person. So and in fact I'm quite extreme on all of these. So I am extremely introvert. I don't talk to people. I am, as we speak, I'm pretending this is an empty room. But it's useful to know, it's useful for people to know that about me. It's useful for me to know other people's types. Remember when I was CIO of Egg, the online bank, the guys that worked for me, I had a bunch of folk working for me, all of them were extroverts, and I was the only introvert. And we had a team meeting in Derby, because we had big operations up there. And then after the meeting, we were heading back to London. It was an all-day meeting. We were brainstorming, dealing with issues all day. So at the end of the day, I went to Derby station to get the 2.5 hour train ride back to London. And one of my colleagues who'd been with me, one of the chaps who worked for me, appeared on the platform at the other end of the station. And I did what every introvert in the room would do, and in fact I think it's compulsory for introverts to do. I stepped behind a post. And I just waited till the train came. Because the thought of spending another 2.5 hours with someone that I just spent the whole day with, on a train back to London, was just more than my life was worth. So I wasn't doing that. So the train came, I got on the train, I noted where he got on the train, I got out my ticket, it was really busy, and I noticed that my seat was the other side of the train where he was sitting. So, now we have a problem. I walked down the corridor, and there he is sitting there. He's an extrovert, so he wants to spend time with people and debrief. Why do you want to debrief? Don't debrief. So he wants to debrief. So he sees me coming, and he's, hey, Tom, and then I walk straight past him. Because I'm an introvert, because I'm not going to speak to him for 2 hours, so I just walk straight past. And then just almost as soon as I get past him, I think, oh, that was a narrow escape, and then I just go on. But for him, as an extrovert, this was a big deal. Oh God, the boss has just stormed straight. We've been in a meeting for 6 hours, and then the boss has stormed straight past me. He was phoning the other people. Did I say something to Tom? Yeah, he stormed straight past. He didn't storm, but he was convinced that he was going to be fired. He got home, he had a conversation with his wife, they debriefed about the whole thing, he came into work the next day, I said, oh, hi Darren. It's like, what? So we had a whole conversation about it, and we used this sort of Myers-Briggs, sort of type to talk about our different personality types. And it was really useful. So, I talked about, well, look, I'm an introvert, this is what I do. And he talked about, well, extroverts, they need this sort of interaction. And I said, okay, I understand. So thereafter, what would happen is, we worked in different offices. I would ring him up and I'd say, hello, Darren. And he would say, Tom, are you just calling me because I'm an extrovert? And I would say, yes, yes, Darren, I am. He'd say, goodbye, Tom. I would say, goodbye, and then I put the phone down. So it's quite useful, whether it's Myers-Briggs or other types, to learn about yourself and to really try and understand who you are, and then build a team of people who aren't like you rather than a team of people who are like you. The J side, the structure side, I am a to-do list guy. I have to-do lists. I have to-do lists about to-do lists. I go on holiday with to-do lists. You know, literally I will have a to-do list on holiday as well. You know, spontaneous people, they just worry me. They just suddenly they say, hey, let's just go and do this. I think, what the way? No, you can't just go and do this. A good day for me, if I'm waiting at the station and I'm waiting for the 8:23, and exactly as the clock turns 8:23, the train comes into the station, I'm like, yes, this is how life should be. And there are other people who look up and say, whoa, train, where's it going? Who cares? Let's just go. No, I'm not. But I do know that when I'm building my teams, I need some of those crazy people around me, the extroverts, the spontaneous people. I need some of those people. I am a feeling person. I make judgments based on my feelings. Does this feel right? Does it feel right to me? Is it right for the other person? I need the cold, hard logic person who says, actually, whether it feels right or not, logically, this is what we should do, and I need to be able to listen to that. So as you're building the team, really understanding who you are and what sort of person you are is absolutely key. And the last thing really is that, as I said at the beginning in a way, the absolute key thing to creating a business or a social enterprise, I've built schools in London, Hammersmith Academy I created. I'm chair of Ada College, the National College for Digital Skills. I've created a school in Ghana, which is a girls' science and technology academy. Whenever I do things, I start from commitment. I start from, I'm going to do this. I'm going to climb that mountain. I'm going to make this happen. I don't know at that point how I'm going to do it. I probably have no idea how I'm going to do it, but I do know that I have absolutely committed that that's what I'm going to do. And then I figure out all the ways of making it happen and so forth. And I think the key thing for any entrepreneur is to be able to make that sort of statement, to make that bold promise to yourself. And you can feel it if you've made it. If you have said to yourself, I'm going to be a startup guy, I'm going to start this business, I'm not going to apply for a job, I'm going to start this business. You just know that you've made that decision, and everything else follows from that. So the ability to commit to an idea and to say, I'm going to make it happen, is the thing that distinguishes people who actually become entrepreneurs versus people who for years talk about maybe starting a business one day. And I think that there are many of you in this room who have that sort of commitment, and if you go for it, it is an incredibly rewarding way to build your career and live your lives. Thank you very much.
For those of you who know me, to be speechless is actually not something that I've ever experienced. Tom, thank you so much for a speech that was as inspiring, entertaining and informative and just, I don't know, generally awesome. I don't know what to say as that. That's been a high point in my life listening to you speak anyway.
Thank you.
So much. We've got 10 minutes for questions from the audience. So as we've got such a short space of time, can we not have the 15-minute preamble to the question of what colour socks are you wearing? Can we just get straight in there with the question? Missed that, what were they?
Red.
Red, ooh. So who would like to start us off with a question from the audience? Okay.
Hi Tom, great speech. I'd like to ask, so you pitched to Bill Gates. How's that? He's one of my idols, so how was meeting him? Were you nervous?
Yeah, so I mean, we did a speech together, and we were launching. I was CIO of Egg at the time. We were launching Microsoft were launching a new product, and they wanted to have the CIO of a bank talk about the product. It was about 2,000 people. It was really interesting. So I went into this big hall to be introduced to him, and there was only him, me, and the person introducing us in the hall. And I went over to him, and he said, "I'm Bill Gates." I was like, yeah, but there's only 3 of us, and and of course you are. But he's quite a sort of nervous, kind of, you know, slightly introverted, well, very introverted sort of character. And it was interesting. His hairstylist, she said that once she had sat him down and got his hair all straight before he went onto stage somewhere, and then he got up to go away, and she was still sitting there, and she was facing the mirror, so she could see him in the mirror. And behind her, he turned round and ruffled his hair up again. So he's a really interesting character. I mean, I've met a lot of interesting characters. I've met Branson. I've met a lot of these folk, and they always have that sort of, at their core, the absolute belief in what they're doing, as well as being super intelligent and so forth. So I think that's what I see in all of them, that belief in what they're doing and a willingness to take risks, and I think that's really important. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Hi Tom, how did you find your first venture, and what kinds of people did you need around you to make it a success?
Yeah, so with my first venture, well, my very first venture was when I was at university. I went to university in Nigeria. I went to the University of Benin, and I did physics. In fact, I'm actually a failed physicist, and I just do this to compensate for my my inability to do physics properly. And in fact, this may be part of the reason, because while I was doing physics, I also started a fashion company, and we made trousers. It was called Ace, Fashion for Men. Look out for it in all popular, no, it doesn't exist. And so I hired some tailors, and we went and bought loads and loads of material, and we made trousers, and then I sold them around the campus. And then we discovered that we had leftover material from the trousers, so we used that leftover material to make bow ties. So there were these people in mid-80s, Benin City, going around in my trousers and bow ties. And then we branched out into math textbooks, which was sort of less logical perhaps, but we made money, so that was fine. So that I did myself. My first real business, I'd been working for Goldman Sachs. That was one of the persistence things. So Goldman's, I had 16 interviews to get into that company, just over and over again, 16 interviews back to back. And then I got into the company, and then I didn't actually like it that much, so which was a bit irritating, because I thought I was going to spend the rest of my career there. But I saved up some money, and so when I started the company, I started it by bootstrapping to start with. So I had a bit of money saved up. I was out earning money at the same time as building the business. And then when we got to a certain stage, I went and pitched to private investors. I started off, I've pitched a lot. I've pitched to private investors, I've pitched to corporate. The private guys are mostly tax driven. There are lots of tax advantage schemes that make them invest in your company. The venture guys are hard, commercial guys. I remember pitching to these venture guys once, and they just sit there. They don't show any emotion, because if they don't like it, they don't want to pretend they like it. If they do like it, they don't want to pretend they like it, because then you'll think they like it. So either way, you're pitching. It's like telling jokes to an audience that's completely silent. They will just sit there looking at you, and then at the end they'll say thank you very much. So at the end, these guys said, or one of the guys said, so you'll probably want a term sheet before moving forwards. And I said, yeah. I'm not going to move forwards without a term sheet. I said, okay. So we went out. So the guy that was with me, he said, Tom, just what's a term sheet? So I said, I don't know, but it's clear it's something we want. So so yeah, it was bootstrap to start, and then private investors for my first business.
Thank you. Inspirational speech. Carrying on with the pitching to investors, how do you, that's one thing I struggle with the most. How do you organize these sort of events where you can actually pitch to people with money?
Yeah. So, I mean, it takes time, I typically, if I want to raise money, I think to myself, I need to start raising money 6 to 12 months before the money's going to come in the door. I see entrepreneurs over and over again, they push their businesses along, and then at the last moment they say, we need to raise money, when do you need the money? In a month's time. You're out of business. It's just, unless you've got it sitting there, it's not going to. I am talking to people, building relationships. In sales, there's a technique, or there's sort of a sales approach called awareness, interest, desire, action. Over and over again, awareness, interest, desire, action. You've got to make the people you're pitching to aware that you exist at all, but you're not asking them for anything at that point. So well in advance of pitching, you're thinking, who might I be raising money from? Have they ever heard of me? If they haven't heard of me, how do I get them to hear of me? I'm not going to ask them for anything. I just want them to know I exist. Now I want to get them a little bit interested in me, but I'm still not asking them for anything. Now I want them to want to do something, but I don't confuse it that just because they want to do it, they're actually going to do it. And finally, I'm asking them. And you are going to have to fill the pipeline of people who are aware of you. 50 to 100 people are going to need to be aware of you, such that 30 are interested, such that you get to pitch to 10 of them, such that one of them might say yes. And it starts well before you need the money. And that's going to be networking. You need to, which is why the personality thing comes into play. If you're an extrovert person, you're good at networking, you network like crazy. If you're an introvert person, you need to find 5 extrovert people and get them to network for you. And that's basically what you need to do. In my spare time, how I relax, I do Tai Chi. That sort of slow kind of, all that stuff. I do that. It's actually a martial art, It's people don't know that. It's a martial art. Once I was doing this move like that, you see. And I said to my tutor, I said to my trainer, how is that? How is that a martial art? I don't understand it. And she said, what you're doing is you're knocking your opponent's hand away and then plucking their eye out. And I was like, whoa. But I've been doing it for years now, and if anyone was to attack me, I say this, if anyone was to attack me, I've been doing this for maybe 15, 20 years. If someone attacks me, so long as they're moving slowly, they are finished. But the thing about Tai Chi is that what it teaches you is to use other people's energy. Not your own energy. You are never stronger than your opponent. Your opponent is stronger, therefore you've got to use your opponent's energy. You're always looking for leverage. So you may not be looking for the investors. You may be looking for the one person who knows investors. And you're looking to get that one person who knows investors on board and get them to introduce you to investors.
Where's the microphone? Oh.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. First of all, your speech was very inspiring for us. And I'd like to ask, how is it was for you to receive a loan from a bank, if any? And while you were pitching for funding, at what stage was your product finished? Was it completely finished or half there?
Okay. So it just so happens that I have never taken a loan from a bank. Not because I'm against loans from banks, but it's just, I have once taken what's called a venture loan from a bank. I've done that. I haven't taken a traditional loan from a bank. So for startup businesses, I don't like loans in early stage startup businesses. At the stage where the cash flow is unpredictable and so forth, banks are not really geared up for that. So I tend to try and avoid that. And I tend to be willing to give away some equity in order to get more flexible finance into the company, rather than to say I want to hold on to all the equity and I'm going to take a loan instead. The loan looks okay when everything's going well, but in your first 2 or 3 years as a business, you're going to have highs when things are going well, you are going to have disaster periods as well. And banks are very bad at helping you through those disaster periods. So I tend to steer away from that. But I have, in a later stage company, taken venture loans, and venture loans are more tuned to the startup world. I have raised money off the back of a PowerPoint presentation. No product at all, the presentation, and I tell them there is no product. There is this idea. These are the people involved. This is what we're going to do. Give me £150,000, give me £500,000. I've raised money off the back of that. And it is very doable. It's better if you have the proof of concept. That is better. But you don't need to go much beyond that. If you've got a proof of concept, you've got 1 or 2 customers, may not have paid you anything, but they're evaluating your product. You've got a really good business proposition, and you've got the beginnings of a team. You can raise money off the back of that, definitely. I've done that over and over again. In fact, I almost always do that.
That's not the fire alarm, by the way. I would have moved. Sorry, there's a lady there.
Hi.
And then you're next.
Thank you so much for the speech. I just wanted to find out, you said you work for places like PwC and Goldman Sachs. Would you say for us it's still worth applying for like grad schemes and stuff, even though we are looking to maybe become entrepreneurs in the future?
Yeah, interesting. So for me it was useful, but for specific reasons, and I'll explain why, and I'll be very candid about it as well. So I came back from Nigeria. I didn't have a network in the UK. I didn't have people I'd been to school and university with. I was sort of starting from a blank sheet of paper. So 10 years in corporate life, at British Airways, at the London Stock Exchange, at PricewaterhouseCoopers, at Goldman Sachs, it sort of built my network. Also, I went to a university that I had heard of, but nobody I ever spoke to had heard of. But they'd heard of PwC and Goldman Sachs. So part of what I was doing was essentially building my reputation that then gave me a platform to go out there. There were 2 other things going on. Today, I'm the most powerful black person in the UK, but then I was just a black person in the UK. And there's quite a difference. And therefore, when you're going and pitching for money, you need all the reputational skills and contacts that you can bring to the party to get people over the line. The other thing was, I was unsure. I needed to convince myself that I was good enough. And I thought the way I had to convince myself was to work for companies to see if I was good enough. So I really wanted to work for Goldman's because they were the best bank in the world. And then I got a job with them. And then I thought, oh, I'm good enough. And I sort of had to go personally, I had to go on that journey to give myself permission to get out there and do startup stuff. I think the climate has changed now, so I don't think it's so necessary now to have that sort of track record in order to go out and start a business. If you've got the network and you've got the ability to bring people in and support you, then you can pretty much do it from day one. There's no real downside to it, unless you get caught up in it and you say, well, I'm going to be a startup person, but I'll just work for PwC just for 30 years before you're kidding yourself kind of thing. But there's no downside to spending a bit of time. But I do sometimes see people who it's like the be all and end all. I really want to be on a grad scheme. That's what it's all about. Not in this day and age. You can literally just get out there and start. And in fact, one of the things you'll find is you could start a business, run the business for a year, 2 years, it could fail completely, but you will be more attractive to the consultancies and the other businesses if you've done that than someone else, because you have actually been out there, you've been a chief executive, you've raised money, you've hustled, you've sold. you are a very, very attractive commodity at that point if you decide to go back into the corporate market. So people used to think, if I go down the startup route, it's closed the corporate door. Actually, that's not the case. It enhances your CV for sure.
Okay, last question, I'm afraid.
Bill Gross, I think his name is Bill Gross.
Yeah.
He does a pretty interesting TED Talk where he compares a bunch of startup companies and he tries to isolate a few key factors that they all have in common that allow them to succeed. And one of the main things that he identifies is that they came into a market at the right time. So they have a first mover advantage. But he also says that people with a first mover advantage, 80% of those companies fail. And the second movers are typically the ones who establish it. How do you strike a good balance between getting into a market early enough while still having good enough quality? Like, I guess because you learn so much from all the mistakes you've made, that must be one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I never really worry about first mover advantage. I mean, if a market is saturated, you do your market research, you think you've got a good idea, you do your market research, there are literally 20 companies doing the same thing, then I'm not going to go into it. But if I think of an idea, I do my market research, there are 3 other companies or 5 other companies doing the same thing, I'm fine with that. I will still go into that market because you can always, somebody's doing something and they're pricing here, you do the same thing and price there, or you price down there. Somebody's doing something and they're branding it like this, you do the same thing and you brand it like that. So there are actually a lot of ways where you can reposition your company against the incumbents that are already in there. The other thing to keep in mind is that in a lot of people, when they're talking about startups and startups being successful, and particularly the huge startups, so when guys like Bill Gross and others are talking about it, they're often talking about how do you build the next billion-dollar company. And that's great. For people who can do that and build billion-dollar companies, then that's amazing, and you need some special sauce to do that. I can't do that. I don't build billion-dollar companies. I build companies in the tens of millions, that's what I aim to do. And I aim to have a decent stake in them, that when I exit from them, I make a decent amount of money. And that's a really important point. As an entrepreneur, it's really useful to get yourself clear on what it is you're trying to achieve, because the way you go about building a billion-dollar company is different to the way you go about building a £10 million company, different again from the way you go about building a £1 million company. These are different companies. If you're trying to build a company, if you say, okay, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to build a company that is going to get bought by someone else for £1 million in the next 5 years because that gives me £1 million in the bank and then I'm going to do it again, you hardly have to worry about first mover advantage because you can build that company, you can find space somewhere to build a company that size. If you're trying to build a company that's going to be the billion-dollar market leader in taxis or in whatever it is, then you need to look at what are Uber doing, what are these people doing, what are those people doing. So the clearer you can get about what it is you're trying to achieve, that will dictate whether first mover advantage or second mover advantage really matters in your market. It is quite easy to build a company that is just replicating what someone else is doing and saying, what is it they're not doing quite right? What is it I could do a bit better? And just doing the same thing and executing it. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, I would have the mindset that you are going to build 3 or 4 companies in your career, possibly more, but at least 3 or 4 companies. So what you're talking about in day one, you're talking about your starter company. That's your first company. It may be the one that's hugely successful, but who knows? So that one, you don't agonize about it too much. You don't overanalyze it. Is it completely new? Is it going to take over the world? Is it going to be $1 billion company? You don't worry about that stuff. You just say, is it smart? Is it targeted? Right. Let's do it. Let's get stuck in. Let's go flat out. Let's do it. It'll work or fail. And if it works, we've made some money, and then we move on to the next one. And that's how you do it. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We could take questions all afternoon, I'm sure, but I know you have a train to get, so we'll let you get away. Just once more, please, can we just give a huge University of Cambridge cheer?
Thank you very much.